Okay, so we're going to get started right now. I want to share something with you today. What I want to share with you is a recommendation if you're interested. I'm watching a program on Netflix called The Midnight Gospel. And I'm not sure if any of you have heard of this show yet or seen it. It's called The Midnight Gospel. And it is phenomenal. It is one of the weirdest, most interesting shows I think I've ever seen. Essentially, you can almost imagine it like a podcast. It's an existential conversation between the host, a guy named Duncan Trussell, and a guest. And they have this really deep existential conversation each time in the way we would normally have a podcast conversation going on, except it's set in this landscape, this very trippy, like psychedelic landscape that doesn't really have anything to do with their conversation. You could almost just imagine it as like an animated podcast. So you're really more listening to the conversation while you're watching these trippy visuals. It's called The Midnight Gospel. It's very, very, very good. But anyways, the episode that I wanted to just briefly share with you is the third episode. And in it, the person being interviewed is a guy named Damien Echols. His name is Damien Echols. I had never heard of him before. Anyways, he spent 18 years on death row in Mississippi. He was falsely accused of a murder that he did not commit. DNA evidence 18 years later freed him. But in the meantime, he spent 18 years on death row. And he said he spent over half of that time in solitary confinement. And he talked about his process of learning meditation and his process of studying Buddhism and his process of primarily studying kind of Western esoteric traditions, but it was all about energy and meditation and how to focus your mind, and how he ultimately survived his experience on death row through the power of his thought, how he prevented himself from going crazy, living in a solitary cell with rats and sewage and being physically assaulted by guards and just everything that you can imagine that goes on in this place that one might describe as a living hell. And he talks about how he transcended it through the power of his mind. Listening to this interview, I thought this is one of the most enlightened human beings I have ever heard in my entire life. Full of so much light, full of so much joy, full of so much appreciation and gratitude for the experience that he went through, knowing that he would have never gotten to the depth of self-understanding if he had not been put in the classroom of death row. He would have never given the attention to the self-unfoldment that he experienced as a result of being falsely accused and living in this circumstance. Just an absolutely enlightened being. It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. One of the things that he was talking about, and this is primarily why I wanted to share it with you, this is an absolute tenet of yoga. I've talked about it in class before. Energy follows thought. He said your energy goes where your thought goes. So you cannot focus on your complaints without feeding them. You cannot focus on what you perceive as wrong without making it bigger. You cannot perceive on what you don't want without growing it. You must focus your mind in the direction of where you want to go. You must focus your mind on appreciation. You must focus your mind on the things that you want to build. In yoga, we do a lot of time focusing our awareness inward, focusing on our energy centers, focusing on the flow that nourishes us, the flow that restores us, the flow that balances us. So our minds are incredibly powerful. Take it from a guy on death row. Your mind is very, very powerful. He said that when he left death row, when he finally, at the end of his stay there, he felt like his little cell was a control tower through which he could experience the vastness, the interconnectedness of the entire universe. I mean, this dude literally attained enlightenment in a death row cell. It is an incredible story. So that's what I want to share today. The last thing that I'll say is this kind of brings it together. Right before I sat down, I picked up a book by Yogananda and I said, let me just open it at random. And I read a passage where Yogananda, a great teacher from the early part of the 20th century said, if my center, he had a beautiful center. He said, if my center was taken away from me today, I would let it go gladly, and I would go to where the work is that I need to do the work. And if I stay here and take the burden of keeping this center going, and that's the rest of my life's work, I will gladly stay here. I will go and do the work wherever I am placed. I will do the work wherever I am placed. If I lose this, if I keep this, I will continue doing the work. And I think that really just comes full circle with what Damien Eccles was saying. If he's in death row, he's going to do the work. If he's a free man, he's going to do the work. If you have a beautiful center, if you have no center, keep doing the work. Keep doing the work. I will do the work wherever I am placed. Right now, we are placed on our mats, somewhere in our environments. Bring your hands together at your heart. Let's have a sense of appreciation for our environment, for the roof over our head, for the person who may be next to us practicing, or the dog or the cat, or simply the fact that we have a device in front of us that can transmit these teachings. Maybe you're outside, maybe you're inside. I will do the work where I am placed. Rub your hands together, make them warm.